Welcome to Blue Talks.
Hello, everyone. I am so honored and blessed to be here at Columbia University today. When I was growing up, I never quite felt like I belonged. My parents were young. My dad managed a Ponderosa restaurant, and my mom met him there waitressing and then worked nights at a bowling alley while putting herself through dental school. When I was 2, she packed our things and moved us into a motel, away from him. Eventually, we went back, but he was gone. I saw him every other weekend until I was 12, and eventually they both remarried. My mom became both my rock and the waves. She smiled through her pain, held everything silently, and numbed what she couldn't face with alcohol. I saw sides of her no one else did. I wish I could say she always moved in grace, but our relationship was complicated. She loved me fiercely, but as an extension of herself, not always as a separate soul of my own. At 12, I was diagnosed with ADHD, major depressive disorder, panic attacks, and anxiety. I was prescribed Ritalin, then Adderall, Prozac, then Paxil, Zoloft, and Xanax. My mom told me to keep it all a secret, and then I noticed she was stealing my medication. What I didn't know was that I wasn't sick. I was sensitive. A geosentient empath, and I had been feeling things that weren't mine since I was little. I once brought home a palmistry book, excited and curious, and she told me I was going to hell for even reading it. To her friends, I was God's gift. To her family, I was a spoiled brat. I became a performer, a perfectionist. I sang in chorus every year. I played many sports starting when I was 5. Even in high school, I went to an international cheer competition on ESPN2. I had 2 university scholarships for academics that I never pursued. Victim mentality already had me in a chokehold. When I was 17, I moved out, and my mom reported me missing, and I was court-ordered to live in a halfway house. I turned 18, I lost my insurance and access to medication and therapy. I got pregnant by a man that I thought loved me. A student at Rutgers, his family from Egypt. I told my mom, hoping she'd support me. She told me she was taking me to the doctor. Instead, she conspired with him, and she took me to the abortion clinic and told me she wouldn't drive me home if I didn't go through with it. When I called him in tears afterwards, he said, "I don't want my blood to live in you." Around that same time, something else unraveled. I found out the man that I thought was my dad my whole life might not be. He was suddenly all over ABC News and People magazine, speaking publicly about being a victim of marital paternity fraud. He led a group that posted 9 billboards across New Jersey that said, "Did she lie to you?" My mom and the courts denied it all, saying he never had proof. I left Jersey not long after that. I moved through 8 states and countless versions of myself, chasing the unconditional love that I never felt as a child. I lived with men who mirrored the chaos I grew up with and even worse, abused me. I fell into sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I was even a music promoter and a bartender at one point. I questioned my worth. I questioned my life. I spiraled. I wound up unconscious on the pavement, beaten to a pulp, miscarrying twins from a man who had been abusing and cheating on me, using me to sell drugs and my own body as a cam chat host. He convinced me to leave Maryland and lie to my mom and tell her I got jumped. She figured it out a month later and chest bumped him out of the house. In that month, I was pregnant again, this time with my daughter, Chloe. 3 weeks before she was born, I had a terrible nightmare. I saw everything. The panic of the people rushing into the room, my mom holding my leg, and the sound of a cow dying coming out of my mouth. And I tried to stop it in the dream, but I couldn't. And when she was born, it happened exactly like that. She got stuck during delivery, and for over 10 minutes, there was no heartbeat. She didn't breathe. She was blue, limp, gone. But I never stopped believing. Doctors said she had something called HIE, which is hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. And they whisked her away to Philly to induce a coma and freeze her brain for 72 hours. They weren't sure she was going to make it. She had a full blood transfusion and was on 13 different meds by the time I got to the hospital, stitched front to back. They told me she might never walk or talk or breastfeed or eat on her own. She spent 2 months in the hospital and came home with a feeding tube in her stomach. But I refused to accept that as her story. I advocated, I learned the therapies, I took her to all appointments, and all that wouldn't have been possible without my mom by my side. Today, Chloe walks, she talks, she runs, she shines. She is the miracle they said was impossible. She overcame it all, and she is the reason why I remembered how to live. But even after that, life kept breaking me open. We made it through, but the breaking didn't stop. I took a DNA test with Ancestry. I needed to know the truth because I was pregnant again, and my son, Draven, almost 10 years later. And it turned out my dad was right. I wasn't his. But that's a story for another day. In 2020, my rental's basement flooded. All of the neighbors had water. Mine had raw sewage. We lost so much just like that. And we were homeless. We lived in a shelter for 3 months. I tried to make it seem like an adventure for the kids while quietly crumbling inside. I was doing everything I could, and still it felt like life was swallowing me whole. Then, a month after we moved, around the corner from the shelter in the ghetto, I received a phone call. My mom was being taken to the hospital because her body was shutting down due to alcoholism. I was expecting a phone call from her before they put her in a coma to try and save her life. They asked her if she had any family to call, and she said no. I realize now she was in so much mental pain that if she talked to me, she knew she would come back, and she didn't want to. When I had the priest come and read her last rites, I saw a tear fall from her eye. Part of our culture is that we open a window so the soul can ascend. After he left, I tried to open the window, frantically realizing that it wouldn't budge. They removed the ventilator, breathing for her, and I was the only one in the room with her, holding her hand as she took her last breath. And that's when I prayed and envisioned her crossing over. Then I went home and wrapped presents. It was 2 days before Christmas, and I smiled through Christmas morning so my daughter wouldn't carry the heartbreak through her holiday. I didn't tell her that Oma had passed until after New Year's. And that was the moment everything broke open. Grief stripped me down to nothing. I couldn't keep up my own strength. I couldn't keep holding everyone's healing while ignoring my own. I had spent my entire life surviving, shape-shifting, shrinking, pretending I was okay while quietly unraveling. Her passing slingshot me into my spirituality. That was the moment I stopped pretending. I didn't find God in a church. I found God in my tears, in the homeless shelter, praying every night before bed that bullets won't shatter through the windows, in the NICU, in the silence, in the mess, in the places I thought would destroy me, but instead it awakened me. And that's when everyday spirituality was born. Not as a brand, as a lifeline. I realized I had been projecting onto others what I had actually needed to give myself. I stopped drinking, smoking cigarettes after 20 years, weaned off my antidepressants and ADHD meds. I stopped being a victim of my life and started co-creating with it, understanding that all my challenges are opportunities for growth. I dove deep into personal development and studied many different modalities, like Reiki, astrology, human design. I learned about quantum energy healing and light language and spirit release, and studied with a shaman who showed me the laws of the universe. I gobbled up free master classes and spent thousands I didn't have, but somehow figured out a way to manifest. Then I came across Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi's free event, Own Your Future Challenge. And it lit a fire in my heart knowing that I can help inspire the world and raise the frequency of our beautiful planet. I started to accept every emotion without shame. I accepted responsibility for my healing and gave myself permission to feel safe, loved, and divinely guided. And my life has gotten exponentially better because it was all happening for me, not to me, like Tony says. This is how I live now. This is what I teach my children and others. This is how we all rise. I began listening to my intuition. I started holding space for my emotions instead of numbing them. I stopped abandoning myself to be loved, and I began to remember the truth that saved me. I am not broken. I am not too much. I am not too late. I am not my trauma. I am not my mother's pain. I am not my worst moment. I am the kid that was bound to the system, and now I'm destined to break free. I am the one who kept rising anyway. Everyday spirituality isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about lighting a candle, not for ritual, but because you want to feel warmth again. It's about sitting with a crystal and seeing the sacred in the simple. It's about remembering that healing isn't something you earn, it's something you practice. It might look like setting a boundary. It might look like crying in the car after school drop-off. It might look like telling the truth for the first time in your life. That is spirituality. That is sacred. And if no one's told you lately, you are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to trust your inner knowing. You are allowed to build a life that feels like home. I created everyday spirituality for the ones who are done pretending, for the survivors, the feelers, the ones who have been through hell and still believe in light. Thank you for hearing my story. I hope it awakens something sacred in yours.